They saw a woman pushing a stroller, a ghost in beige linen pants and a plain white t-shirt, and dismissed her. They saw a dependent, a civilian, a soft target in a world of hardened men. They taunted her, calling her a paper pusher, a creature of the rear echelon, and when she did not react, they mistook her stillness for fear. They cornered her, their arrogance a suffocating heat, and crossed a line that should never have been approached. It was only when the general arrived, his eyes catching the faint, dark ink on her wrist as she moved with a speed that defied physics, that they understood their mistake. They had not cornered a sheep, they had cornered the wolf who guarded the flock, and the tattoo was not decoration, it was a resume written in the silent language of the elite. Now, before we show you just how badly they miscalculated, we need you to report for duty. Deploy your finger to that like button, secure the subscription, and activate the notification bell for immediate alerts. And in the comments below, tell us the one place you would never want to be underestimated. Because what they started, she finished. The heat was a physical weight at Fort Bragg. It pressed down on the vast parking lot of the South Post Commissary, turning the black asphalt into a shimmering, sticky trap. Heat waves danced above the hoods of 1,000 sedans and pickup trucks, distorting the horizon into a wavering line of pine trees and brick barracks. The air smelled of hot tar, cut grass, and the faint, greasy promise of the food court charbroila. It was the smell of any Tuesday afternoon on any military installation in the summer. Predictable. Mundane. Ilara Vance pushed the stroller across the faded white lines of a pedestrian crossing. One of the front wheels had a persistent squeak. Squeak roll, squeak roll. The rhythm was a tiny, irritating counterpoint to the distant thud of artillery practice and the drone of AC-130 lumbering across the Carolina blue sky. Her son, Leo, was asleep in the stroller, his small chest rising and falling in the manufactured shade of the canopy. A single bead of sweat traced a path from her temple down her jaw, but she did not wipe it away. Her movements were economical, her posture perfect. She did not slouch against the stroller's handle, she stood behind it, a silent, steady engine providing the force. Her appearance was a study in deliberate anonymity. The beige linen pants were loose and practical. The white t-shirt was clean but unremarkable. Her hair, a nondescript brown, was pulled back in a severe, functional knot at the nape of her neck. She wore no makeup, no jewelry save for a plain, thin silver band on her left ring finger. Her face, pleasant but forgettable, was a mask of placid neutrality. She could have been a teacher, a librarian, an administrative assistant. She was designed to be overlooked, a piece of background scenery. But her eyes were different. They were never still. They did not just see, they observed, catalogued, and assessed. They noted the white panel van with mismatched tires parked 2 rows over. They clocked the young soldier arguing on his phone near the cart return, his agitation making his gestures wide and unpredictable. They tracked the flight path of the transport plane, estimating its altitude and speed out of sheer, unbreakable habit. Her head remained perfectly level, but her gaze swept her surroundings in a constant, fluid pattern, a human radar system running on silent. The squeaking wheel was the only thing that betrayed any friction in her world. She made a mental note to apply some graphite lubricant when she got home. It was a small problem, easily solved with the right tool and a methodical approach. Most problems were like that. She reached her car, a modest gray sedan that was as anonymous as she was. She parked the stroller parallel to the rear passenger door and clicked the button on her key fob. The locks chirped obediently. The interior of the car was an oven, the air thick and suffocating. She opened both doors on the passenger side, letting the worst of the heat bleed out into the already baking afternoon. Her movements were precise, with no wasted energy. She unbuckled Leo's harness, her fingers deft and sure, and lifted him from the stroller. He murmured in his sleep, his warm, damp head resting against her shoulder. She held him for a moment, her neutral expression softening almost imperceptibly as she breathed in the scent of his skin. That was when the shadow fell over her. "Ma'am, you're going to have to move your vehicle." The voice was young, full of an unearned confidence that grated on the ear. Ilara did not startle. She had been aware of their approach for the last 30 seconds. 3 of them. Young soldiers, judging by the crispness of their uniforms and the arrogant swagger in their walk. They were on some kind of parking lot detail, a miserable duty in this heat, and misery often bred contempt. She had seen it 1,000 times. She turned slowly, shifting Leo's weight in her arms. The speaker was a lieutenant, his gold bar gleaming on his patrol cap. He was handsome in a generic, athletic way, with a jaw that seemed permanently clenched to project authority. Flanking him were two enlisted men, a specialist and a private, both of them built like weightlifters and wearing identical smirks. They were enjoying this. "We're clearing this section," the lieutenant said, gesturing vaguely with a clipboard. "VIP coming through. You need to move. Now." Ilara's eyes flicked from his face to the empty spaces around her car. There were dozens. There was no operational reason to clear this specific spot. This was about power. A small stage for a small man. "I'll just be a moment," she said. Her voice was quiet, even. "I just need to put my son in his car seat." The lieutenant, Thorn, according to the name tape on his uniform, took a step closer. He was deliberately invading her personal space, a classic intimidation tactic. "Did you not hear me, ma'am? I gave you an order. Move the vehicle." "You gave a request," Ilara corrected him softly. "I'm a civilian. And I will be out of your way as soon as my child is secured." The specialist on Thorn's right snorted. "Hear that, sir? A civilian. Thinks she knows the rules." Lieutenant Thorn's eyes narrowed. He looked from her plain clothes to the dependent identification card clipped to the stroller's handle. The corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. "Oh, I see. Just a dependent. Probably work over at finance, pushing papers around. A little paper soldier." The phrase hung in the hot, still air. Paper soldier. An insult reserved for those in the rear, those who shuffled forms and processed payroll while the real soldiers were out in the field. It was meant to diminish, to categorize her as weak and insignificant. Ilara's expression did not change. Her heart rate remained a steady 60 beats per minute. Her breathing was slow and even. She had been called worse by far more dangerous men. This was just noise. "Please step back," she said. The words were not a plea. They were a statement of fact, a final opportunity for them to de-escalate. It was a courtesy she was not required to extend, but one that was deeply ingrained in her protocol. Always provide an out. The lieutenant saw the courtesy and mistook it for a crack in her composure. He saw a frightened woman, a helpless mother, and his arrogance swelled to fill the space. He smiled, a flash of white teeth. "I don't think so," he said, his voice dropping into a mock-soothing tone. "Maybe you're a little overwhelmed. Hot day. Crying kid. Let me help you." He reached out, his hand moving not toward the car door, but toward her. Toward the sleeping child in her arms. It was a gesture meant to assert dominance, to show that he could touch her child, and there was nothing she could do about it. It was the last mistake he would make that afternoon. The world did not slow down. Time did not warp. For Ilara Vance, the world simply became clearer, each detail snapping into hyperfocus. It was a state she knew well, a cognitive shift from passive observation to active processing. The switch had been flipped. She saw the glint of sweat on the lieutenant's upper lip. She saw the slight tremor in the private's hand as he shifted his weight, a sign of nervous energy. She smelled the cheap, spicy deodorant radiating from the specialist. She registered the exact trajectory of Thorn's hand, a clumsy, telegraphed arc moving at a predictable velocity. Her body moved before her conscious mind had finished processing the input. It was not a decision, it was a response, drilled into her nervous system by a decade of relentless, brutal training in places that did not appear on any map. Her first movement was almost invisible. A fractional shift of her hips, rotating her body a mere 15 degrees away from the incoming hand. She did not retreat, she repositioned, creating a new angle of engagement. Leo, still asleep in her arms, moved with her, his weight a stable, known variable in the equation. As Thorn's hand passed the spot where her shoulder had been, her own left hand came up. Not in a block, which would have been crude and inefficient, but in a gentle, guiding motion. Her palm met his wrist, her fingers wrapping around the radial bone with the casual precision of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. She was not grabbing him, she was connecting to his skeletal structure. For a microsecond, the lieutenant registered only confusion. His hand had been met not with resistance, but with a soft, yielding pressure. Then the pressure changed. Ilara applied a subtle torque to his wrist, a movement that traveled up his arm as a wave of pure, agonizing fire. His ligaments screamed in protest. His brain, which a moment before had been filled with arrogant certainty, was now flooded with a single, primal signal: pain. His knees buckled instinctively. A strangled gasp escaped his lips. Simultaneously, her right foot slid forward, her shoe landing silently beside his boot. It was a simple, elegant pivot. She used his own forward momentum against him, turning his clumsy advance into an unstoppable fall. He was no longer an aggressor, he was a collapsing object, and she was the fulcrum. He went down. Not in a messy sprawl, but in a controlled, spiraling descent. Ilara guided his fall, ensuring he landed hard on his side, the impact driving the air from his lungs with a wet, whooshing sound. She maintained her grip on his wrist, pinning his arm at an unnatural angle against the scorching asphalt. The entire sequence had taken less than 2 seconds. The two enlisted men stood frozen, their smirks gone, replaced by slack-jawed disbelief. Their brains were struggling to reconcile the image of the quiet, unassuming woman with the reality of their lieutenant writhing on the ground, his face contorted in agony. The specialist, recovering first, reacted on instinct. He blurted a curse and lunged forward, his big hands reaching for her. It was a brawler's move, all muscle and rage. Ilara did not even look at him fully. Her threat assessment had already classified him as secondary. While still controlling Thorn with her left hand, she moved her body like a gate swinging on a hinge. She met the specialist's charge not with force, but with a perfectly timed deflection. Her right forearm intercepted his arm, redirecting his momentum. She stepped into his lunge, flowing past him like water around a rock. As he stumbled past, off balance and overcommit, her right hand chopped down. It was not a punch. It was a precise, focused strike, the hardened edge of her hand connecting with the cluster of nerves on the side of his neck. The brachial plexus. The specialist's entire right side went numb. His arm dropped, useless. His leg gave out. He collapsed onto the asphalt like a puppet with its strings cut, landing in a heap next to his superior officer. He was conscious, but his body was refusing to obey his commands. He could only lie there, his mind reeling with confusion and a strange, tingling sensation. One remained. The private. He was younger than the others, and now he was terrified. He had his hands up in a defensive posture, but his eyes were wide, darting from Ilara to his fallen comrades and back again. He took a half-step backward. Then another. Ilara finally released the lieutenant's wrist. She straightened up, her posture once again serene and upright. She adjusted Leo in her arms, the child hadn't even stirred. She looked at the private, her gaze calm and unblinking. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The sound that broke the sudden, ringing silence was not from any of the combatants. It was the sharp, authoritative clap of dress shoes on asphalt. What in the goddamn hell is going on here? The voice was deep, gravelly, and radiated an authority that was earned, not merely worn. It cut through the thick, hot air like a razor. A man was approaching from the direction of the commissary entrance. He was tall and lean, in his late 50s, with close-cropped gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore a perfectly pressed Class A uniform, the jacket heavy with ribbons and medals. On each shoulder, a silver star glinted in the unforgiving sun. A major general. The private snapped to a clumsy, terrified position of attention. "Sir." The general's eyes took in the scene in a single, sweeping glance. He saw the two soldiers on the ground, one groaning, the other looking dazed. He saw the terrified private. And he saw the woman, standing perfectly still over them, a sleeping child in her arms, her expression as calm as a summer lake. His gaze was sharp, analytical. He was a man accustomed to assessing situations in an instant. This was not a simple scuffle. The way the men were on the ground, one with a clearly hyperextended joint, the other exhibiting signs of temporary nerve paralysis, spoke of something other than a random fight. It spoke of technique. Of training. Lieutenant Thorn, pushing himself up onto one elbow, saw the general and his face went pale with a new kind of fear, one that had nothing to do with physical pain. "General Thorn, sir," he stammered, his voice cracking. It was his uncle. The general's eyes narrowed to slits. The family connection only made the disgrace sharper. Caden. What is this? Explain yourself. Now. Sir, this woman, she assaulted us, Kaidan managed, gesturing weakly with his good arm. We were clearing the area per protocol and she attacked us without provocation. A small crowd of onlookers had begun to gather at a safe distance. A murmur went through them. A woman with a baby had taken down 2 soldiers. It seemed impossible. General Thorne's gaze shifted back to Alara. He looked at her plain clothes, her unassuming demeanor. He was about to speak, to ask for her side of the story, when his eyes caught it. A detail that had been invisible a moment before. During the brief, fluid motion of the takedown, the sleeve of her t-shirt had ridden up her left forearm. Now, as she held her son, a small, dark tattoo was visible just above the delicate bones of her wrist. It was not a flower or a butterfly. It was a stark, stylized design, a scorpion, its tail coiled into a perfect question mark, with a single, blood-red star at its center. To 99.9% of the population, it was just an edgy tattoo. To General Marcus Thorne, who had spent 30 years in the highest echelons of Special Operations Command, it was a ghost. It was the unofficial, vehemently denied unit insignia of Task Force Orion. A group so secret that most generals didn't even know they existed. They were the operators sent in when the SEALs and Delta Force were considered too high profile. They were the scalpel in the dark. They did not officially recruit women. And they did not officially exist. The general's entire demeanor shifted. The anger was replaced by a sudden, profound stillness. His eyes, which had been inspecting a disorderly scene, were now focused on Alara with an expression of dawning, absolute respect. He knew that insignia. He had authorized one of their missions himself, a nightmare in the Hindu Kush from which only 2 operators had returned. He looked from the tattoo back to her calm, impassive face. He saw her now. Not as a dependent, not as a civilian, but as what she was. The quiet posture was not meekness, it was energy conservation. The neutral expression was not blandness, it was discipline. The economical movements were not timidity, they were the hallmark of lethal efficiency. Kaidan, the general said, his voice now dangerously soft, almost a whisper. Shut your mouth. He took a step toward Alara, stopping at a respectful distance. He did not address her as a ma'am. He addressed her as a professional. Ma'am, he began, then corrected himself, his voice low and for her ears only. Operator. Is there a problem here? Alara's gaze met his. There was a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes, a silent communication between 2 people who understood the real rules of the world. They were obstructing my path, she said simply. They refused to move. Then the lieutenant attempted to touch my son. Her tone was flat, declarative. She was filing a report, not making an accusation. General Thorne's jaw tightened. He turned his head slowly, his gaze falling upon his nephew with the force of a physical blow. The lie Kaidan had told moments before now hung in the air, a pathetic, transparent thing. Military police, the general said, his voice suddenly booming across the parking lot. Get me the provost marshal. And get these 2 embarrassments to the uniform out of my sight. They're confined to barracks. I want them standing in my office at 0600 tomorrow. And someone get this private a new pair of trousers. He had noticed, as Alara had, the dark stain spreading on the young man's fatigues. 2 MPs, who had been cautiously approaching the scene, now hurried forward, their professionalism jolted into high gear by the presence of a 2-star general. They helped the dazed specialist to his feet and hauled the groaning lieutenant upright. Sir, we were just, Kaidan started to protest, his face a mask of panicked disbelief. I told you to shut your mouth, Lieutenant, the general snapped, his voice crackling with contained fury. You are a disgrace to me, to this base, and to that uniform. You mistook discipline for weakness. You mistook restraint for fear. You picked a fight you could not possibly comprehend, let alone win. You are lucky, he paused, his eyes flicking back to Alara, that all you have is a sprained wrist. As the MPs led the 3 disgraced soldiers away, a silence fell over the remaining crowd. The witnesses were now looking at Alara with a mixture of awe and confusion. They had seen what happened, but they didn't understand it. The general turned back to Alara. His demeanor softened again. My profound apologies for the conduct of my subordinate. And my nephew, he added, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. There is no excuse for his behavior. He was given an opportunity to de-escalate, Ilara stated. It was the only justification she would offer. It was all that was needed. I have no doubt, the general said. He gestured toward her car. Please, allow me to help you with your groceries. It's the least I can do. It was a surreal sight. A major general, his chest a billboard of military achievement, carefully loading bags of milk, bread, and diapers into the trunk of a gray sedan while one of the most dangerous human beings on the planet gently strapped her sleeping child into his car seat. When the trunk was closed and Leo was secure, Ilara turned to the general. Thank you, sir. No, he said, shaking his head. Thank you. For your service. And for your restraint. He looked at the spot where his nephew had been. You could have done a great deal more. There was no need, she replied. The objective was to neutralize the threat to my son and create a safe egress. That objective was met. Her language was clinical, precise. She was speaking his language now, the cold, clean dialect of mission parameters and acceptable outcomes. The general nodded slowly, a deep and profound understanding passing between them. He knew people like her. He had built his career commanding them. They were quiet, unassuming, and utterly lethal. They lived by a code of control that civilians, and arrogant young officers like his nephew, could never understand. Their greatest weapon wasn't their ability to inflict violence, but their discipline in choosing not to. Will you be pressing charges? He asked, a formality. Ilara shook her head. No, sir. I believe you will handle the matter internally. The lesson is more important than the punishment. The lesson will be comprehensive, the general assured her, his voice grim. I can guarantee you that Lieutenant Thorne's career of harassing civilians in parking lots is officially over. He paused, then looked at her with genuine curiosity. Vance. Is that your married name? It is, she confirmed. And your husband? Colonel David Vance. G3, 82nd Airborne Division, she answered. A faint smile touched the general's lips. Of course. She had married a conventional soldier, a good one by all accounts, but someone who lived in the bright, orderly world of the regular army. He wondered if Colonel Vance truly knew who he went home to every night. He wondered if he knew that his wife could dismantle a foreign embassy with a paperclip and a roll of duct tape. Probably not. People like her didn't share their work at the dinner table. Well, the general said, stepping back and giving her a clear path. Drive safe. Ilara gave a small, single nod. It was the closest she would come to a salute. She got into her car, the engine starting with a quiet hum. As she pulled out of the parking space, she glanced in her rearview mirror. General Marcus Thorne was standing where she had left him. He was no longer looking at her as a general addressing a civilian. He had brought his heels together, his back ramrod straight. As her car passed, he raised his hand to his brow in a slow, perfect salute. It was a gesture of profound respect, a silent acknowledgement from one warrior to another, hidden in plain sight in the middle of a commissary parking lot on a hot Tuesday afternoon. Ilara drove away, the squeaking stroller wheel now silent in her folded-up back seat. Her heart rate was still a steady 60 beats per minute. The problem had been assessed, addressed, and resolved. Now, she was just a mother, driving her sleeping son home. And that was exactly how she wanted it. The quiet life was a mission she had chosen, and she would protect it with the same silent, lethal efficiency with which she had protected everything else. The world was full of noise. She preferred the silence. It was where she had always done her best work. She turned on the radio, a soft melody filling the car, a stark contrast to the symphony of controlled violence she had conducted just moments before. The afternoon sun beat down, but inside the car, with the air conditioning humming, it was cool and calm. Just the way she liked it. The incident was already receding in her mind, filed away as a closed engagement. There was laundry to do, dinner to prepare. The mundane, beautiful rhythm of the life she had fought so hard, in so many dark and forgotten places, to be able to live. And no arrogant lieutenant was going to disrupt it. The lesson had been delivered. The message received. End of transmission.